All right, everybody, welcome back to Horn Takes. It's a special edition of the Rundown. We're going to do this one on Wednesday because tomorrow's Thanksgiving. So all you guys, hope you have a happy Thanksgiving tomorrow with your family and friends. A lot of pretty big games this weekend. We got Michigan at Ohio State. We got, this is a big one for me, KU at K-State. Obviously, we've got Baylor at Texas. USC and Notre Dame, that looks like a big one. From a playoff implication perspective, we've got Florida State. A lot of rivalry games this weekend. So it should be a good weekend of college football. Let's jump right into it. We're going to talk about a few games today, pretty in-depth, a little bit in-depth. First one we're talking about is Michigan, Ohio State. This one is a pretty big one on the national stage, obviously. They're both ranked in the top 4 in the playoff poll, the college football playoff poll. I was looking at the stats on this one, and I haven't got a chance to watch Michigan or Ohio State play a whole lot this year. I've seen them play a little bit each. So I was digging into the stats on these two teams. And I think this game really comes down to who can establish the run. They both have really good rushing offenses. They also both have really good rushing defenses. Advantage to Michigan on both. Not by a whole lot. Position-wise, it looks like it's a lot. Yardage-wise, it's not all that much. But I think the team that can establish the running game in this game, and I think that holds true. It holds true a lot, but it especially holds true for this Michigan and Ohio State rivalry. I think the team that outrushes the other wins this game 99.9% of the time. The big question for Michigan is Blake Corum. Does he even play? If he plays, how effective is he going to be? He suffered some sort of knee injury. It looked like a sprain, and I'm assuming it was a sprain based on the fact the Michigan medical staff said there was no structural damage during his evaluation after the game. I'm sure they did an MRI and all those things. But he's a running back, and a sprained knee, I've had sprained knees several times. They can be pretty painful. There can be a lot of stiffness in that joint. And for a running back, that could be kind of tough to play through. So I saw an article yesterday where they wouldn't know about his status until later in the week, which makes perfect sense. I'm sure they're rehabbing or treating that as aggressively as they can. But I think that's a huge question mark either way for this game. I said earlier in the week that I think if he can play, I think Michigan has the advantage. I think Michigan kind of has to be the favorite. And then if he can't play, I think Ohio State kind of has to be the favorite. The one thing I would say, though, Michigan's running style is very power run oriented. There's not a lot of reads. You look at a team like, say, Oregon under Chip Kelly or UCLA under Chip Kelly, whole lot of zone blocking schemes, and the running back more or less is trying to look for a place to go. Whereas the more power running game, the power blocking schemes that they employ at Michigan, there's a designated hole. And not that the running back can't go, oh, it's not there, let me go somewhere else. But the offensive line at Michigan is obviously really good. I think more than likely they do a good job of creating space where they're supposed to create space. So I'm not saying it doesn't matter that Corum might be out, but I think because of the style of offense, the style of running game that Michigan has, it's not as important who that guy is taking snaps. Basically, this game will be won in the trenches, right? Like whoever wins on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball the most consistently is probably going to win this game. I think another key to this game is which defense can make some big plays in the passing game. The passing defenses are both really good as well. I think if you look at Michigan and Ohio State and the way they like to run offense, the passing game is probably more important to Ohio State than it is to Michigan. They had a preseason Heisman favorite type guy, a guy that a lot of people would probably say he'll wind up in New York in CJ Stroud. So, but on the flip side, Michigan, they're going to put pressure on the defense. If they can run the ball consistently, there's going to be a lot of pressure on the defensive backfield to stay with guys on play action and things like that. So it won't be nearly as flashy as what you see with Ohio State, but Michigan can certainly hurt you through the air. Just my gut on this one, I feel like Michigan's going to get it done on both sides of the line of scrimmage. We talked about it just a minute ago. Them having guys out at the running back position is different than a lot of teams having guys out at the running back position. I think their offensive and defensive lines are going to control this game for the majority. And I think they get a win 31-24 over in Columbus. So we'll see. I look forward to this game every year. I think the weather's supposed to be pretty decent. 52, I think, is the high. I don't know exactly what it'll be at kickoff, but it doesn't look like there's any high chances of precipitation or anything like that. So I think great day to play football. And I think those big guys are going to enjoy it because it's going to be nice and cool. So anyway, that's my gut. I think Michigan's going to get it done. And then the question is, well, what happens to Ohio State? Let's say it doesn't matter who wins. Let's just say obviously one of these teams is going to lose. What happens to that team in the playoff picture? They're a one-loss team. I think it kind of depends on how they lose the game. I think if you see a blowout, then I think you're going to see some teams get jumped. Unless something happens with USC. LSU is, I think, I'm not saying they're a shoe-in to lose against Georgia, but let's just assume that's what happens. That Georgia will be heavy favorites in that game. I kind of think Michigan or Ohio State, whoever loses this game, just depending again on whether it's a close game or a blowout type game, I think they're going to get the benefit of the doubt from the playoff committee. A lot like the SEC has gotten the benefit of the doubt several times when they have one-loss teams, even teams that lose late. All right, KU and K-State. Obviously, this is a big game from a Big 12 championship game implication perspective. K-State wins, they're in. If KU can pull an upset and Texas can beat Baylor, then Texas will be in the Big 12 championship game. It's hard to imagine a 3-loss team making it to the Big 12 championship game, but that's where we're at. Big 12 has kind of been TCU by itself all year, and then the rest of the conference has kind of all been back and forth. Who the favorite? A few weeks ago I said I think K-State's the guy. I think they're the team that's the most consistent. I think they're the team that's going to make it. But there was always the chance that Oklahoma State, Texas, Baylor for a while, Oklahoma even for a while after their really poor start. So I don't think there's a lot of hope for Texas fans on this one. I think it's a rivalry game and anything can happen is kind of the only chance KU has in this game. I don't know. Maybe the QB catches fire. Maybe he was rusty last week coming off an injury. I don't know. I just feel like there's not a lot of chance we're going to see a KU victory. All that being said, we've seen it before. We've seen a lot of times where late in the season, teams that have it all laid out in front of them find a way to mess it up. And we're not talking just conference stuff. We're talking national championships type stuff. I can't remember the year, but there was a year a while back. It was probably, man, when was it? There was a year a while back where there were so many teams that were undefeated and they were all just lined up right for that second spot and they all just kept losing. Nobody wanted to be the other team in the national championship game that year. It was back before the playoff. I think West Virginia blew a chance. KU blew a chance. Louisville blew a chance. Really, really odd thing. So we've seen that before where uh, teams have gotten upset late in the season with a lot on the line. I don't think we're going to see that this time. I think K-State wins this game big. It's at home. KU just got crushed by Texas. Really, KU has nothing else to play for except for it's a rivalry. So, man, I got K-State big over KU, 45-21. I'm hoping for a different outcome. I know all Texas fans are hoping for a different outcome, but I don't think we're going to get a different outcome. We got Baylor at Texas. Texas is back into the college football playoff rankings. I think they're ranked 23rd. I don't care about the rank. I think rankings are basically useless. Especially now that we have the playoff. And if the playoff expands ever to 12, they're going to be really useless. I mean, unless you're the 13th or 14th team. I mean, I guess at some point they have to be useful. We're not going to take all 130 teams into the playoffs, but I feel like to be able to compete in the playoffs, you have to be one of those teams that's ranked in the top 4. And even then, a lot of those teams don't really compete in those games. We've seen a lot of blowouts in the playoffs. So anyway, Baylor at Texas, they kick off Friday. I believe it's 11 a.m. kick. Sort of another playoff type game for Texas. They have to win it for any hope of moving on to the Big 12 championship game. Statistically, these teams are almost identical. I mean, they're running offense versus running defense, passing offense versus passing defense, almost identical. Both of these teams want to run the football. So it could be one of those kind of ugly running type games. Like some of those games you used to see in the SEC back when all these SEC defenses were the rage. Isn't it interesting how the SEC almost completely doesn't play defense right now? There's like one team in the SEC that really plays strong defense. What you would call an SEC defense. It's turned a lot in a lot of ways into a very offensive league. So we might get one of those ugly type games where there's really big plays in the running game that make a difference. Maybe even some really big plays in the passing game, although the passing game isn't sort of it's not the center of what's happening offensively for both teams. So I think the keys to the game for Texas, they obviously need to continue to stop the run. They've been really good this year against the run. They've been really poor against the pass. I think Texas needs to lean on the run game heavily, early and often. Like the games Texas wins, they're able to successfully run the football, and they don't give up on the run. And I've been critical of Sark before. You look at the Oklahoma State game, and you look at the TCU game. In the Oklahoma State game, it was really criminal what happened because they ran the ball really well in the first half. And then I know at the beginning of the second half, obviously Oklahoma State made some adjustments and the run game just wasn't coming as easily, but that doesn't mean give up on it. And then in the TCU game, they just pretty much gave up on it from the very beginning. And again, I know TCU was doing a lot to disrupt the running game, and we were getting almost nothing in the running game. So I understand why it could be frustrating to be the play caller. but you're in a really close game. I mean, that game was what, 3-0 at halftime? There's a difference between I have to give up on the running game because we're down by 28 points or even 21 points. There's a difference between that and I feel like I need to give up on the running game because it's just not coming as easy as I want it to. We've seen that Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson, and by the way, Roschon Johnson got hurt in that Kansas game. I don't know the nature of the injury. It looked like a lower leg type injury. He's been rehabbing all week. Coach Sark said he believes that he's in good shape right now. I don't know what any of that means. Texas has a huge stable of running backs, so I'm not. If Roschon doesn't play, I'll feel really bad for him. Senior day, last game of his senior year. I guess technically he could come back for the COVID year, but I don't think there's really anything else Roschon Johnson can prove to the NFL. I don't think he can improve whatever his stock is with the NFL. I don't think it can be improved. So I don't expect him to come back regardless. So I really hope he gets to play, but if he doesn't, it's not as if Texas is in bad shape. Jonathan Brooks is a really good back out of Hallettsville, Texas. He went for over 100 against KU. And then they've got a freshman, last name Blue. He's a really talented guy too. So they've got the backs. There's Keelan Robinson as well, transferred from Alabama, that kind of plays like a hybrid role. He'll line up in the backfield, but he lines up in the slot a lot and takes reverses and things like that. I believe he was the recipient of Quinn Ewers' only touchdown pass against KU. So, yeah, they got to lean on the running game. No matter what's going on, they have to lean on the running game. I think Ewers is going to have to make some plays through the air. He's going to have to figure out a way to connect with some of these wide receivers. I think what's going to happen in this game is I think Texas's running game is going to get slowed down. It's not going to be like it was last week against KU. It probably won't be what it was against Kansas State. But I don't think it gets stopped completely. And I think if Sark will stick with the run, it'll be enough consistently over the course of 4 quarters to put Texas in a position where Ewers, again, doesn't have to carry the team because Ewers is talented. He's just not ready to carry a whole team by himself. So I think Ewers will get his confidence back. I think he turns in a good performance through the air, not a magical performance. You know, to me, a good performance for Quinn Ewers would be a decent completion percentage. You know, like let's say 65% of his passes, 60% of his passes. North of 60%, I think, is really good. Even though I know in some of these offenses, these guys are completing upwards of almost 70% of their passes. I think anything north of 60 is really good. I think he'll turn in that type of performance. I think he'll, you know, if he throws for a couple 100 yards and a touchdown, I think that's good. That's a good performance. Score prediction for this game: I think Texas wins this game 38-20. Like I said, you know, I think a lot's going to happen on the ground game or in the ground game, on the ground in this game. But Texas is really dangerous. You know, Bijan Robinson can score from anywhere on the field. Roschon Johnson can score from anywhere on the field if he's healthy. Jonathan Brooks can score from anywhere on the field if he's healthy. So they can get big numbers out of the running game. I don't know. We'll see how the team turns up. I mean, again, I talked about it last time going up to KU. I thought, you know, this team doesn't have a lot to play for, really. And I still don't think they have a lot to play. I mean, They want to win, obviously. I think them being in the Big 12 championship game is a huge long shot. I think the drive has to be let's go out and make our record 8-4. Let's put ourselves in a better position for a better bowl game. And all of those things are good springboards for a good season the next year. So I think that's the motivation. Obviously, you want to win for your seniors on senior day. Traditionally, this game after Thanksgiving is never very rowdy. It hasn't been in years. I wish they would just move it to Saturday. I get the tradition angle. For a few years, so this game used to be played, for those of you that don't know, on Thanksgiving, and it was between Texas and Texas A&M exclusively. Then at some point they moved it to Friday, and then right before A&M jumped to the SEC, they moved it back to Thursday. So I've been to a few Thanksgiving Day games against Texas A&M, and those were more rowdy games. In-state rivalry. Usually both teams were decently ranked on a national stage. But now you got this round robin thing in the Big 12, and it's just a lot of games nobody cares about. Move it to Saturday. Get the crowd back into it, because I just think I think that's important, obviously, and I think tomorrow it's going to be pretty dead. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. We'll see if the fans that do show up are excited and rowdy. I don't know. I just can't see it. So I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of excitement in the building for that game. So the players are going to have to go do it themselves. All right, who's on upset alert? We've been doing upset alerts. I enjoy doing upset alerts, and I'm actually oddly, I'm surprised at my own self. I'm actually all right, decent at these. I'll probably screw it up. I probably just jinx myself. But who's on upset alert this week? So number one, I think Clemson is on upset alert this week. Clemson is they really struggled early in the season. They've gotten better, and they're coming off a big win against one of those Florida schools, Florida State or Miami. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was Miami. Beat them up pretty bad. But I don't think South Carolina will ever be more dangerous than they are right now. I mean, Spencer Rattler has got to be so full of confidence at this point. That dude threw for over 500 yards and 6 touchdowns against Tennessee last week. I think that team believes they can go beat anybody. And sometimes that's all you need. You just need to be able to believe that it doesn't matter who you're playing. You can go out there and execute. And I think for South Carolina, they're at that point right now where they feel like that. And then I think if you look at Clemson, they're like the most vulnerable 10-1 team in college football history. I mean, I don't know that we've ever seen a 10-1 team that's kind of had the ups and downs they've had this year. They've just been really low under the radar, right? There's not a lot of excitement about Clemson football. And maybe that's just because for so long they've strung together what they've been able to do, what Dabo Sweeney or however you pronounce it's been able to do there at Clemson is pretty historic in terms of just the consistency with which they've won. I don't know the exact statistic, but they've been a 10-win team for like a decade, basically. That's hard to do. But I think again, they're probably like the worst 10-1, most vulnerable 10-1 team we've ever seen. So it wouldn't surprise me in South Carolina. It's a rivalry game. Wouldn't surprise me if they figured out a way to win that game. It also wouldn't surprise me if they just went in and laid an absolute egg. And I'm not saying that to try to cover myself. I just think that's kind of like the psychological part about college football is what are these guys going to do? You know, they just got done beating the ever living piss out of Tennessee, who at the time was highly ranked, highly thought of, was in a lot of the conversation. Well, they were in all the conversations about who's that next team in to the college football playoff if TCU loses, or what happens if when the Big Ten, when one of those guys loses. Does Tennessee get in? And then just bam, done. That could be a positive thing for South Carolina. They could, like I talked about, they could have that confidence and just be really dangerous. Or they might, they're kids, right? They might think they're the greatest thing since sliced bread and just go in there and piss right down their legs. I don't know. We'll see what happens. For the second week in a row, I think Ole Miss is on upset alert. There's been a lot of rumors swirling around about Lane Kiffin leaving for Auburn. There's a lot of guys. There was some tweet that came out that said this is going to happen on Friday. Egg Bowl is on Thursday. Said Friday, he's gone. And there's a lot of other talking heads, guys that do podcasts like me that they think it's going to happen too. So I don't know. Uh, Lane Kiffin since has come out and said that's news to me, but that's what Lane Kiffin would do. I don't know Lane Kiffin personally. I know the way he's handled some of these coaching moves has been. I'll just say they were handled differently than how most people would handle things and how most people feel like things should be handled. All that being said, this whole coaching thing, the way these guys move around and the way these back channel deals get done, you kind of have to lie. If people ask you about it, you kind of have to lie about it because until the deal's done, the deal's not done. So those things could be a distraction for his team. They just got smoked on the road at Arkansas. Really humbled in that game, I think. They don't have a lot to play for either. And then there's the whole pirate thing. Can the pirate do it again? The pirate has made a living off of beating teams that he shouldn't beat, kind of messing up people's seasons. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Mississippi State found a way to upset Ole Miss. Bama, I think Bama's on upset alert. I know they're highly favored. I know Auburn's not that good, but it's the Iron Bowl. I think for whatever reason, I couldn't tell you what the reason is, but the team has really rallied around Cadillac Williams. And I think he's got that team. Those guys are playing for him, obviously, but I also think they're playing for each other. I think Auburn probably, they're not as talented as Alabama, obviously, but I think there's always been talent on those Auburn teams. I think the execution of it has just kind of been a problem, and the consistency with coaches. I don't know how many coaches they've had lately, but it's been a pretty big carousel. So it's hard to be consistent, and it's hard for that talent to come out if you don't have consistency in the coaching staff. So puncher's chance, I think Auburn has a decent chance of upsetting Bama. Bama struggled this year, and I know the record doesn't show it, but they're really not the Bama teams we've seen in the past. And I think they're obviously not going to be in the SEC championship game this year. I've talked about it a bunch on the podcast. I really feel like we're kind of on this teetering edge for Bama and for Nick Saban. You just feel like it's not the same as it used to be, and when it's not the same, you start dropping games. Fans start getting upset because they can't understand how you can't continue to deliver on this sort of historic pace that you were delivering at. And then the crazies come out. I saw a video on TikTok from a podcast that these folks do. Pretty big podcast. They've got callers and all that kind of good stuff. So a big show. An Alabama fan actually called in and said that if Nick Saban won't fire his two coordinators, that he should be fired himself. I'm a huge proponent of just because you built it doesn't mean you get to run it directly into the ground. I was that was sort of my stance on Mac Brown. There was a lot of Texas fans that said you can't run Mac Brown off. He was a national championship coach and he's done so much for the program and he's built the program up and had it at a level that it hasn't been since Darrell Royal, and all those things are true. But I also feel like just because you built it doesn't mean you get to completely destroy all of that. You still have to be able to produce. So I get that aspect of it, but Alabama fans, that's not happening after 1 year. Maybe it's the beginning of it, and maybe that's what we see. And you shouldn't wait 10 years to fire a guy that just can't win games anymore. I'm not saying that. But they're 9-2. Fire Nick Saban is a little bit putting the cart before the horse at this point. I think USC's on upset alert this week, and I think ND is a much better team than UCLA. And UCLA, if they wouldn't have had 4 turnovers in that game, who knows what happens in that game? I mean, I think they win that game without the turnovers. And here's the discussion about turnovers. You always have this discussion, well, the defense turned them over. I think there's 2 different kinds of turnovers. There's turnovers where the defense absolutely does force the issue and big hits on the ball, strip sacks, stripping the ball out of running back or a wide receiver's hand, purposely, like, I'm going to go cause this turnover. And yeah, absolutely the defense causes those. But then there's turnovers where quarterbacks make ill-advised throws. And at least 2 of the interceptions that the UCLA quarterback threw last Saturday were those type of plays. He should have never thrown the ball. So point I'm getting at is I think UCLA did more to give those turnovers away than USC did to take them, if that makes sense. I think Notre Dame is as good or better as Utah, and Utah beat USC this year. I know the game's technically at home, but USC has no home field advantage. It wouldn't surprise me if there's less than 30,000 people at that game. I think USC as a team has probably got to feel a lot of pressure. As you continue to win the way they've won, and now you're in a position to go and compete for your conference championship in year 1 under Lincoln Riley. I think there's pressure for him, and I think there's pressure for that team. Notre Dame doesn't have anything to do except go on the road and try to beat a huge rival. So I don't know. I think that game will be interesting. I think USC is probably the more talented team, but we all know talent doesn't always win out. And I think Notre Dame is just kind of that tough type of team that they can go in and go on the road and win this type of game. They've improved a lot over the season. They had a rough start, and they've kind of turned it around. So there it is. There's the rundown for this week. Again, I hope you guys have a very happy Thanksgiving. Subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends about the podcast. Video of the podcast will be up on YouTube always at Horn Takes Podcast. You can find me on TikTok at Horn Takes Podcast. You can email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com. Questions, comments, concerns, criticisms. I'd love to hear them. You guys have a happy Thanksgiving.